Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's the CD guy, Johnny Z here. Thank you so much for tuning back into the channel, and today I'm going to be counting down 10 legendary metal bands who never released a bad album. First off, let's just talk about some bands, some of my favorite bands that won't be included here on this list. Bands like Megadeth because they have Risk or Super Collider. Bands like Black Sabbath because they have Forbidden. I'm not going to be including Judas Priest because they have Demolition and, not a big fan of the Rip Row and stuff. Also not going to be including here anything from Iron Maiden or Metallica, two of my all-time favorite bands, and two bands that I really don't think have a bad album in their catalog, but, you can definitely acknowledge a dip in quality upon releases like Saint Anger or No Prayer for the Dying, so even though I don't mind Saint Anger, and I'm not really a big fan of No Prayer for the Dying, but I wouldn't say it's a bad record, I have to acknowledge the dip in quality there, and really what I'm focusing on this list is bands who are able to maintain a certain level of consistency, a consistent level of greatness, I should say, throughout their entire catalog, so that said, let's get started here with my number 10. Kicking things off here with my number 10, I'm going to go with the solo career of Rob Zombie. Started in 1998 following the demise of White Zombie with the release of Hellbilly Deluxe. Rob Zombie is so unique and so much fun to listen to and is able to incorporate his unique brand of humor into his music. Some of his marquee releases have to be Hellbilly Deluxe, his solo debut, I should say. The Sinister Urge is fantastic. Educated Horses. I really enjoy Hellbilly Deluxe too. And then his most recent album from 2021, The Lunar Injection Kool-Aid Eclipse Conspiracy, is great to boot. And, I listened to this album a lot when it first came out. Haven't listened to it as much lately, but I definitely do need to give it a spin because it's such a great record and one of my favorites from last year. Awesome stuff here by Rob Zombie, who, like I said, is so much fun to listen to. So coming in at number 10 here, I think he definitely deserves a spot on the list. Gotta go with the solo career of Rob Zombie. Next at number 9, I'm gonna go with Ghost. Hands down, one of the most unique metal bands of all time, and, I know it's up for debate whether or not you actually consider Ghost to be a metal group. I know a lot of people don't, but for me personally, I definitely do. Fronted by Tobias Forge, they seem to get better and top themselves with every release, and, some marquee albums in their catalog have to be Prequel. Meliora as well is great. I also think that Impera, their most recent album, is fantastic, and, all these albums really do showcase that unique sound that the band incorporating certain elements of pop rock as well as traditional metal. I know Tobias Forge is a big old school metal fan as well. You can definitely hear that in their sound. They're such a great band that seem to get better and more popular with every release as well. So coming in at number 9 here, I'm going to go with Ghost, a group that I really don't think have a bad album, and like I said, continue to get better with every release. For my number 8, I'm going to go with Amon Amarth, one of the premier Swedish melodic death metal bands, considered by many to be Viking metal, but they've always called themselves a melodic death metal band, so that's what I'll call them. And, since their debut in 1998, I'd say every release since has been at least a 4 out of 5 or higher, so that's a great sign, including their most recent record here from 2022, released a couple months ago, The Great Heathen Army. Awesome album here, and I would have loved to have reviewed it for the channel, but I just didn't get around to it when the album dropped, but it's a great record, and hands down my favorites from this year thus far. Just goes to show that all these years later, the band are still making great music, consistent with their sound, so that said, coming in at number 8 here, I'm going to go with Amon Amarth, a great band, still making great music. My pick for number 7 is Slipknot, one of the biggest metal bands in the world, who actually have a new album coming out next week, The End So Far, so we'll see if this entry still stands at the time of the release of the album, but right now, as it stands, they have a perfect catalog, in my opinion, absolutely flawless, and, stay tuned to the channel for my review of the new record, The End So Far, next Friday, but right now, as it stands, I think their catalog is perfect as it is, so, there are some absolute new metal essentials on there, like their earlier work, but then over time, they would see their sound begin to commercialize a bit, while still holding on to some of their classic sound. Great example of this would have to be the most recent record at this point, and that is We Are Not Your Kind. Awesome album as far as I'm concerned, even though it's a little bit different from some of their earlier stuff. Fronted by Corey Taylor, he's an absolute beast and the lifeblood of this band, who never disappoints. So coming in at number 7 here, I'm going to go with Slipknot, an epic band, a lot of fun to listen to, and again, it'll be interesting to see if this entry still stands after the release of The End So Far, coming next Friday, so definitely stay tuned to the channel for my review of that album. Since I ruled out bands like Black Sabbath, Megadeth, Iron Maiden, and Metallica at the top of the video here, that gives me the chance to talk about groups that I don't really get the chance to talk about all that much, which includes my number 6 on the list, Tool. Tool, one of the all-time best progressive metal bands, who also incorporate elements of art rock, alternative, and post-metal as well, to create something really interesting and cool, in my opinion, really different as well. They only have 5 albums in their catalog, but every one of them is an absolute banger, in my opinion, and they're described as a thinking man's metal band, and they always exceed expectations as far as I'm concerned with their uniquely awesome, proggy, melodic, and sometimes brutal signature sound, enough to earn them a spot here on this list. So coming in at number 6, I'm going to go with Tool, a great band that unfortunately I don't get the chance to talk about all that much, but definitely wanted to give them some love here on this list. Breaking into the top 5, I'm going to go with the Swedish power metal band Sabaton, another one of the most recognizable metal bands bands in the world who get a lot of hate from a lot of people who claim that they're overrated or whatever, but I never really understood the hate for Sabaton. I think they're a lot of fun to listen to, and, much like Ghost, they seem to get better with every release. Personal favorites of mine from their catalog have to be Careless Rex. The Great War as well is fantastic. That was actually my introduction to the band. Heroes is a great album as well, and then their most recent album, The War to End All Wars, is fantastic. Hands down, one of the best power metal albums of 2022 thus far as well. They seem to get better as their catalog expands, which is why they're my number 5 here on the list. Definitely deserving of a spot in the top 5 in my opinion, so I gotta go with Sabaton. For number 4, how about W.A.S.P? One of my all-time favorite bands here, and a group that really never fit into a particular subgenre of metal. They were much too heavy to be glam metal, but they had too much of that hair metal look to be traditional heavy metal, so they just kind of walked that line for most of their careers, but in my opinion, they don't have a bad record out there. Fronted by Blackie Lawless, I don't think he's capable of writing a bad album at this point. With so many great albums in their catalog, like their debut, like The Last Command, Inside the Electric Circus as well, The Headless Children is great, right? My favorite album of all time, The Crimson Idol, an absolute masterpiece. You have Still Not Black Enough, KFD, Hell Dorado, Dying for the World, Unholy Terror, The Neon God Part 1 and 2 is great, Babylon, Golgotha, Dominator, so many great albums out there under the W.A.S.P banner. They don't have a bad record in my opinion. Some that are stronger than others, sure, but not a bad album. I could say, this sucks, never, I've never listened to a W.A.S.P album and said, this is terrible, I can't listen to this, because they're such a great band with so much talent. Blackie Lawless, like I said, is an absolute musical genius, and they are teasing something for the 28th of September. I'm hoping it's new music here. That would be very exciting, and very excited to see W.A.S.P live in a couple months as well. They're finally touring North America starting soon, and I'm going to get to see one of my all-time favorite bands live for the first time, so that's really exciting. Coming in at number 4 here, gotta go with W.A.S.P. Don't have a bad album out there, and even though, like I said, they really couldn't fit into a particular metal subgenre, they walked the line between hair metal and traditional metal their whole careers, and made a great discography out of it, so coming in at number 4 here, I gotta go with W.A.S.P. Top 3 now. For my number 3, I'm gonna go with one of my all-time favorite bands, Alice in Chains. Founded in 1987, Alice in Chains would rise to prominence as one of the big 4 of grunge alongside Nirvana, Soundgarden, and Pearl Jam, but I've always considered Alice in Chains to be more on the metal side of grunge than anything else. And, the reason I wanted to include Alice in Chains here is because regardless of the era, whether it be their early and classic work with Lane Staley in the 90s, or their more recent stuff in the 21st century fronted by Will Duvall, the band don't have a bad record in my opinion. The closest they'd have to a lackluster album would have to be Rainier Fog, but that album has grown on me a lot lately, so Alice in Chains, like I said, definitely had to be on this list. Some of their marquee records, for me at least, have to be their debut, Facelift, awesome record. Dirt as well from 1992. You have Tripod from 1996. And I really enjoy, like I said, the 21st century stuff. I think Black Is Way to Blue is a great comeback album. And then, of course, you have the 2 EPs released in the 90s, that being Sap and Jar of Flies. A very important part of their catalog that shows a different side of their songwriting process, and their range as well as musicians. So, definitely has to be included when it comes to some marquee Alice in Chains releases. A great band with all hits and no misses in their catalog. My number 3 on the list, grunge legends Alice in Chains. Perhaps no other entry has a more consistent catalog than my number 2 on the list, and that is Motorhead. And the thing with Motorhead is they followed a very tried and true formula throughout their entire careers and didn't really stray from what made them and that classic Motorhead sound, which of course was established by Lemmy tuning his bass to sound more like a guitar. Then on lead vocals, nobody sounds quite like Lemmy. So, Motorhead was so recognizable and unique, and they're one of those bands that didn't really feel the need to change up their sound at any point in their careers, releasing just great record after great record after great record, and a lot of that does have to be, brought up as a testament to their consistency over the years as well. With some marquee records in their catalog, such as Ace of Spades, Overkill. I think this is a really underrated record here. Bomber, great album. 1916, a personal favorite of mine, super underrated. Also, some of their more recent stuff towards the end of their catalog, like Inferno, Hammered, We Are Motorhead as well, are great in addition to that. So, I think Lemmy and company never had a bad album. Great stuff. Even though a lot of their albums did sound similar, it was because they never felt the need to stray from the sound that made them, because every album was so consistent and great, in my opinion. Coming in at number 2, I gotta go with Motorhead. They played rock and roll, and they don't have a bad album out there. And finally, coming in at number 1, you'd be hard-pressed to find a more perfect catalog than that of Death's. Pioneers of the death metal scene, fronted by Chuck Schuldiner. It's hard to find a best death album because they're all fantastic, Personally, my personal favorite might be Leprosy, because that was my introduction to the band, but it's hard to pick a favorite when there's also albums out there like The Sound of Perseverance from 1998, Symbolic from 1995, this album here, Human, Spiritual Healing as well, Individual Thought Patterns, Scream Bloody Gore, they're all fantastic, and similarly to what I was talking about with Motorhead, there's a certain level of consistency throughout their entire catalog as well. Never really felt the need to stray all that much from their classic sound. Chuck Schuldiner, fronting the band, an absolute genius, and one of the most important figures in death metal as well. Death, like I said, a driving force behind the death metal movement, one of the all-time best technical death metal bands, and again, you cannot find a bad album in their catalog. They were a band that did not miss, and unfortunately they didn't do any more work in the 21st century because of Chuck Schuldiner's passing in the early 2000s. Their final record was The Sound of Perseverance from 1998, and again, I wish they would have done more work. I wish Chuck Schuldiner was still with us and was still making music, but what a way for them to go out with The Sound of Perseverance, another awesome album here, and again, they don't have a bad record out there. I can't find a more perfect catalog than that of Death's, so coming in at number 1, I'm going to go with Death and their awesome discography with so many great records out there. They did such great work and were so consistent as well. So that wraps up my list, counting down 10 legendary metal bands who didn't make a bad album, which should be visible right over here. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. We are on the road to 1,000 subscribers, so if you feel like supporting the channel, please go ahead and subscribe. Turn on the bell for notifications as well, and let me know down in the comments below what are some other great metal bands who did not make a bad record. Let me know your opinions down in the comments. I'd be very interested to hear what you guys have to say. And until next time, it's the CD Guy, Johnny Z, signing off. Take care, everybody.